Welcome back. So the University of Johannesburg's Library, together with the Democracy Works Foundation, hosted a dialogue aimed at enhancing democracy and amplifying civil society's voice in government. The dialogue, titled "The Future South Africa We Want and Deserve," comes amid calls from various civil society organizations for a national dialogue with government. Let's now get insights with the event moderator, Executive Chairperson of Democracy Works Foundation, Professor William Gumede. Professor Gumede, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. When we're having conversation with our colleagues a bit earlier on, speaking about the National Coronavirus Command Center, the NCCC, that was set up during the height of COVID. It was unprecedented. Nobody knew what was happening. But the concern that was raised at the time was that the voices of civil society is absent at that decision-making table. How do we ensure that this time around that those voices are actually heard and are actually in that decision-making room?
Good morning, and thank you for having me. I mean, it's going to be, we've got a once-in-a-generation opportunity here with the Government of National Unity to to reimagine South Africa, to actually finally get that public service delivery going, to keep the country safe. I mean, you just talk about crime, and we've got 80 murders a day in South Africa, which is the highest crime rate, outside of war zones. So it's absolutely going to be critical to have civil society partnering and also leading. A lot of the conversations has been all about Government of National Unity, political parties, political leaders, the state, but it's actually going to be civil society, business, professionals, communities, and ordinary citizens are going to be more important, to remake South Africa and use this opportunity to create a different country.
Yeah, how do we do that, Prof, when you're also dealing with the issue around the so-called political elite and the not-so-elite who are not part of that particular network where decisions are being taken?
Absolutely. I think the very first thing has to be, for the political elites to accept civil society's role. One of the reasons the last 30 years why our government has failed, why we've got a 42% unemployment, our infrastructure has failed and the state has failed, is the political elites that's been running the country, their opposition to civil society, to civil society to deliver services. And when I talk about civil society, I include business, I include community groups and professional groups. There has been an absolute reluctance to partner with civil society. And civil society is not just what people think, it is just, opposing, protesting, or going to the courts. That's not alone what civil society does. Civil society is absolutely important in the capacity of the state. So the first port of call is going to be accept that civil society will have to be an equal partner. When I say an equal partner, not an add-on for government, not coming to civil society for PR purposes, for optic purposes, or not coming to civil society when everything has failed totally, and then government goes to civil society.
Yeah. Is there a conversation, Prof, to be had about civil society itself and how civil society is sometimes perceived to be biased? You look at the period of former President Jacob Zuma, and civil society was very, very active in calling the administration out. And the perception from some people is that during the tenure of the sixth administration of President Cyril Ramaphosa, it almost sounded as though that civil society had become mute.
That is half true. It's not right. Civil society, even during the president of Ramaphosa, delivered many services. Let me give you an example that people may not understand. That in social development, when you say social development, the government obviously gives grants, but a lot of the services in social development is actually delivered by civil society, community groups, NGOs, and so on. So in parts where the state has failed, civil society is actually delivered. So people don't understand. I mean, just to extend that, 1.2 million people in South Africa are employed by the wider civil society sector, which excludes business. And of that, about 800,000 of them are young people, and that's that sector has more employment, for example, than the construction sector. So, that's really is the key. So that is why civil society is so important. And then on the second group, what has happened globally also, sadly, most of our civil society in South Africa, they delivers these critical services, get their funding from abroad. And because we had the Russia-Ukraine war, we had COVID, and now, the Gaza conflict, a lot of this funding has not come to South Africa anymore. So a lot of our civil society organizations also collapsed, like our businesses have collapsed because of state failure. Civil society organizations also collapsed, both because of geopolitical reasons, less income to our civil society, which is mostly funded by foreign taxpayers. Money. And then secondly, also the collapse of the state failure also collapsed civil society organizations also.
Okay, the national dialogue, the president has obviously called on all South Africans to participate in the national dialogue. But how should citizens trust the process of the national dialogue when, for instance, the statement of intent that is now paving the way forward for the national dialogue, you hear the ministers, or the political parties that are part of the statement of intent are political parties that were also campaigning on a reduction of a cabinet. Yet, we now have an expansion of cabinet, and you have the minister in the presidency, Kumbuzo Chaveni, blaming voters for that expansion of cabinet.
A national dialogue is absolutely fail if it's driven by the state, if it's state-led. I mean, I think as South Africans, we must just forget about the state leading and the political parties leading a national dialogue. I forget it. It's going to be, again, like a moral regeneration that we had during the previous presidency and so on, where immoral leaders were leading a moral regeneration movement. It's sort of called as a moral degeneration dialogue or movement. So it is absolutely going to be critical the civil society leads it, or be a equal partner. When I say equal partner, it's not an add-on, equal partner, they will actually have to set the agenda. And secondly, it is going to be really important for any dialogue to work that we don't have the same people be recycled to lead a dialogue. That we don't have politicians, former politicians who all been part of one administration, the other have been tainted, that we don't have them leading or giving ideas, because a dialogue has to be honest, and a dialogue cannot be based, the agenda for the dialogue cannot be based on slogans, cannot be based on past ideology, and cannot be based on received ideas and so on. It has to be robust, and we have to offer something totally new to the country, not the past. And that is why we can't have recycled politicians leading a dialogue, or the state on its own leading a dialogue. This has to be the first time that there is a real co-leading. So civil society must have as much power as the state or politicians.
Prof, let me quickly take you abroad. The breaking news coming out of the UK is that the Labour Party has won by a landslide victory, and Keir Starmer will be coming in as the new Prime Minister of the UK. What do you think the election of Keir Starmer, as well as the re-emergence of the Labour Party, means for South Africa, considering that the UK is also one of the biggest trading partners of South Africa?
I mean, it's an important moment of change in the UK also. I mean, again, for us, we have to be strategic. There's a new leadership coming into the UK. I mean, it's a good opportunity actually to force, a new relationship. Because we in South Africa also, I mean, we're in a new phase, in a new moment, also an uncertain moment, but an exciting moment, a hopeful moment. I think there's a lot of benefits if we strategically partner, strategically engage with this new leadership. And the Labour Party leadership is very likely going to look around for allies around the world. And again, when we negotiate with the UK, with that new leadership, and with any other country, we have to put our strategic interest first. What is our strategic interest? We need to get economic growth in South Africa. We need to get jobs in South Africa. We need to get investment in South Africa. And that must actually be at the front end always of our negotiations, not the past, not old friendships, not ideology, but our interest. How do we rebuild South Africa has to be the number one thing when we negotiate with a new, Labour government and with other governments, our other allies. We have to even re-look at all of the arrangements with our allies, whether it's the BRIC allies, and ask ourselves, is this giving South Africa growth? Is this helping with unemployment in South Africa? And if it doesn't, we have to renegotiate. It's absolutely critical. Our strategic importance, not our friends' importance. Strategic partners is not about friends. It's not about ideologies. It's about our interests as a country.